Welcome back to No Christians, the Bible doesn't say that. Today is part 2 about the myth that the Bible condemns ending a pregnancy early. No Christians, the Bible doesn't say that.
All right, let's see it.
In fact, not only does the Bible allow it, it actually gives a weird little recipe.
I'm going to preempt the argument a little bit by saying I don't think this is the best reading of this passage, and I think it is problematic to try to leverage this passage as a biblical endorsement of abortion, and I'll talk about why afterwards.
Let's look at Numbers 5. There's a ritual called the bitter water test. If a husband believes that his wife is being unfaithful, then he would bring her to the priest. The priest would make a little drink with a mixture of holy water with dust from the tabernacle floor, with a couple of other things.
More specifically, the woman brings a grain offering before the priest. The priest dishevels her hair and then makes her swear an oath, and we'll talk about what exactly the outcome of this oath is in a moment, but then takes dust from the temple floor, mixes it with just regular water, not holy water, writes the curse down, then scrapes the ink of the curse off into the water, and then she hands over the grain offering, which is part of it is thrown on the altar, and she drinks the water. And then if she is guilty, the curse takes effect. If she is innocent, something else happens that we'll talk about next.
Now, the text says that if she is guilty, her abdomen would swell and her womb would miscarry. That's not me twisting words. That's straight from the passage.
So here's where I think things are getting a little squishy. To begin, this content creator is addressing the two different outcomes if the woman is declared guilty by God. And there are two different clauses that describe these outcomes. They're found in verses 21, 22, and 27. But rather than address the two different clauses, this content creator is just providing two different translations of one of the clauses. Because one of the clauses says that her thigh will drop or fall. And here thigh is most likely being used euphemistically as a reference to genitals. So this has something to do with deformation of the genitals. Now that's going to be important. We're going to come back to that. But the other one says her womb or belly will tsava. And this is a verbal root that doesn't occur anywhere other than in these three verses in Numbers 5 in the Hebrew Bible. So we're not exactly sure precisely what it means. However, based on later usage within later Hebrew and based on comparison with other Semitic languages like Arabic, we think it means to grow and or to sprout, based on analogy with its use in reference to plant life. So it could mean, as this content creator said in the first translation they offered, her womb or belly will swell. Or if you understand the notion of sprouting to be used as an analogy for the womb discharging, it could be interpreted to mean her womb will discharge. So it depends on how you understand the verbal root tsava. Now, there are three reasons I think the verbal root tsava should be understood to mean swell and not discharge. The first is the fact that the swelling of the womb is more parallel to the other outcome, which is the falling or dropping of the genitals. So it's about deformation of the reproductive organs. And this is imagery that is used in other ancient West Asian literature to refer to infertility. So I think that the most likely reading here is that the woman is cursed with infertility, which is manifested through the deformation of her reproductive organs. Now, there's another reason that I think this is most likely, and that is the fact that if she is innocent, the outcome is that she will sow seed. In other words, she will conceive. And this is something that is taking place in the future. She has not conceived prior to this ordeal. The blessing is that she will conceive, which suggests that the authors of this text do not view this ordeal as taking place in view of or in light of an existing pregnancy, which suggests that they do not view the other outcome as the ending of an existing pregnancy. In fact, the earliest rabbinic references to this text that we have, that becomes known as the Sotah within Judaism, features debates about whether or not it would be appropriate to subject a pregnant woman to the Sotah. And they ultimately decide it would be, But by this time, there's no temple anyway, and so they're not actually able to perform the sotah. And I don't think that we have any evidence at all that it ever took place. And if it did, nothing would have happened, because water, dust, and ink do not an abortifacient make. And no, there's nothing special in the dust of the temple floor that would turn it into an abortifacient. And no, there wasn't something odd in the ink that would turn it into an abortifacient. This is about magic. This is about an ordeal where you don't have evidence, and so you bring it to God and allow God to supernaturally reveal the truth. So this is just an ordeal that was intended to test if a woman had been faithful, and I think the most likely interpretation is that if she has not been faithful, she's cursed with infertility. If she has been faithful, she is blessed with fertility. Now, that's not an overwhelming consensus. In fact, I think the scholarship is probably more or less split on which interpretation is best. But those are the reasons that I prefer that interpretation, but you will certainly find scholars who support the other interpretation.
So here's the reality. The Bible actually outlines with directions for how to do it under God's command. So if someone tries to tell you or convince you that the Bible is against a woman's right to choose, remember, no, Christians, the Bible doesn't say that.
So here's where I'm going to suggest that it's not a good idea to try to leverage Numbers 5 as biblical support of abortion, not only because I don't think that that's the best interpretation of the Hebrew of this passage, but also this has absolutely nothing to do with a woman's right to choose. This is an ordeal that is forced upon the woman against her will and her agency. And if there is an abortion that takes place, it's because she is declared to be guilty by God, and she is punished with either permanent disfigurement or, more likely, in light of what this magic would do to a woman's body, death. So this is something that men are imposing upon a woman that, if it were to actually result in the termination of a pregnancy, would kill her or ruin her life. So I don't think this is about a woman's right to choose, and I don't think it's helpful to leverage it as that. Now, this is a very popular kind of meme. This is a very popular interpretation of the Bible to suggest that there's a recipe for abortion in the Hebrew Bible. I don't think that's the case, and I think we're better off abandoning that attempt to rhetorically leverage the Bible, because I think it actually does more harm than good. But that's just my opinion on this. That's certainly not the academic consensus. And the fit for this video has been the Data Over Dogma podcast.